5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live, looking live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to our brilliant and astute audience who wants something more than just the usual superficial stuff. And momentous events are taking place.
Seriously.
That really bring to bear the security system of the West that has kept the West safe and preserved democracy since the end of World War II. What's going on is much bigger than just the future of Ukraine. Let's not forget, Vladimir Putin started gratuitously, aggressively, the by far bloodiest, worst war in Europe since World War II.
All right, let's get right into it. On August 15th, Donald Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska to discuss the war in Ukraine. The summit ended without an agreement being announced. 3 days later, European leaders as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with Donald Trump at the White House about possible security guarantees for Ukraine. Now Donald Trump and the White House are promising a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. So much is happening, Dad. What's your take on all this?
Well, let's just start with the meeting between Putin and Trump. If you recall, on our last show, I thought that something would come out of this meeting, and that is Trump would make concessions to Putin. And that's exactly what happened. That's why it is arguably the worst diplomatic meeting in the history of the United States.
That's a big claim.
Yes, but before I get to the specifics of the meeting and why I think the result was 5 points for Putin, 0 points for Trump, I want to put it in a little bit of historical perspective. What does Trump hope to get out of settling the Ukrainian war? He's talked about this a lot. Claims he would deserve it. What is that?
A Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace Prize. Well, let's look at the two presidents who got the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating conflicts. Okay?
Okay.
Do you know who they were?
Two presidents who got it for media. I don't know.
Theodore Roosevelt, while he was president, and Jimmy Carter after he left the presidency. Theodore Roosevelt got the Nobel Prize and the adulation of the world for mediating peace between Russia and Japan to settle the Russo-Japanese War. Did he sit down, Sam, just with one side of that war? No. He brought together both sides and worked out, mostly behind the scenes, a peace agreement with the two sides meeting face to face. He understood how futile and counterproductive it would be just to meet with one side. He understood the principles had to get together face to face. Otherwise, you would never come to a reasonable agreement or one that would stick. Do you remember what Jimmy Carter was famous for? What famous peace deal he worked out?
No.
The Camp David Accords in 1978. And this was cited in his Nobel Prize that he won when he left the presidency. But the Camp David Accords were very much a part of that. And in the Camp David Accords, he worked out a peace treaty that ended, at least formally, the long-standing war, and practically two, between Egypt and Israel. Sam, did he just meet with one side at Camp David?
I'm assuming no.
No. He brought the two sides together, Sadat of Egypt and Begin of Israel, and worked with the two sides to work out the famous Camp David Accords, probably the high point, the greatest accomplishment of Jimmy Carter's one term in office. So Trump is defying standing in the face of the kinds of mediations of wars, bringing together both sides, that led to Theodore Roosevelt and Jimmy Carter winning the Nobel Peace Prize.
But isn't he doing this possibly if he
I'm going to get to that. I understand.
Okay.
I haven't gotten there yet. We're
Gotcha.
a long way from there.
Gotcha.
I'm still talking about his one-sided meeting with Putin. That's all that's happened so far, right?
True.
The rest is pie in the sky, and I will get to it.
True.
Now, the great historian and political analyst Masha Gessen has pointed to an analogy, and I have another one, of course, the famous Munich Accord, but she had a much more obscure one. She pointed out that this, again, was very much like the Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill in return for the Soviets getting into the war against Japan, giving the Soviets Japanese territory. The Kuril Islands, which they possessed. They ethnically cleansed the Japanese, and they occupied it. But perhaps the most direct historical parallel is the most famous one, if you can hold this for 1 second, and that, of course, is the famous appeasement of Hitler at the Munich Conference of 1938. In which he supposedly mediated a dispute between Hitler and the Germans and Czechoslovakia. But again, it was a one-sided meeting, just like with Putin meeting a murderous dictator. And do you remember the result of that, Sam?
Hitler continued his march forward.
Exactly. They ceded to Hitler, got nothing in return except his pledge on peace. The Sudetenland, a critical portion of Czechoslovakia, which left Czechoslovakia vulnerable to the Nazis, and of course this whole thing gave the Nazis the green light to start the most destructive war in history, World War II, that both on the Eastern and Western Front claimed over 60 million lives, most of them civilians. And of course, in the course of that war, Hitler launched the Holocaust against the Jewish people that resulted in the mass murder of 6 million Jews. And Hitler said very much the same things at Munich that Putin is saying face-to-face with Trump. Hitler said, "I have made tremendous efforts to further the peace, and I will not stand any more attacks by Czechoslovakia," blaming it on Czechoslovakia, even though, of course, all the aggression was Hitler, just as Putin has blamed the war on who?
Ukraine.
Ukraine. That's crazy it is. And he says, we want peace. And there's this famous newsreel of Neville Chamberlain waving this piece of paper in the wind saying, I have this agreement with Hitler, and we're going to have peace in our time. That's what happens when you have these one-sided meetings and cave in to murderous dictators. Now, I said in the last show I thought Trump would wind up making concessions to Putin, and that is exactly what has happened. He made 2 huge concessions to Putin. Before the meeting, he said, we have to have a ceasefire, and if we don't have a ceasefire, the consequences in terms of sanctions are going to be very severe for Russia. Did they get a ceasefire, Sam?
No.
Did Trump abandon his quest for a ceasefire?
Seems so.
Yes. And were there any consequences for Russia?
No.
So Trump, what did they call him? Taco? What did that stand for, Sam?
Trump always chickens out.
Well, he certainly chickened out face-to-face with Putin. Gave in to 2 huge concessions to Putin. And what did he get in return, Sam? Squat. Nothing. Third big thing he gave Putin was the red carpet treatment, right? The applause.
Yeah, that was
the
sick.
plane. In other words, legitimizing on the level of a democratic leader a bloody, murderous dictator who kills and imprisons his political opponents who launched this horrible war of aggression that's claimed probably over 100,000 lives on both sides, many of them civilians. He's committed horrible atrocities in Ukraine. He is a war criminal indicted by the International Criminal Court, and yet here is Trump giving this murderous dictator the red carpet treatment.
Yeah, that was really sickening. And seeing Putin in the limousine with this big smile on his face,
yes,
gave me the creeps.
Yes. And guess what media lauded and applauded the results of this meeting?
Fox News.
No. The Russian media.
I think some people, like I heard Hannity said it was a 10
Fox
out of
News,
10.
Was a little bit,
Mixed.
some on Fox News actually were critical. But the Russian media was absolutely ecstatic. They couldn't have gotten more than they could have dreamed of at this meeting. Elevating Putin, abandoning the ceasefire, abandoning the sanctions. So this means that Putin can continue to rain terror on the Ukrainian people, can continue to try to gobble up more territory of a sovereign nation, a UN member, while Trump has abandoned the quest for a ceasefire, and he can do so with no consequences, no new sanctions, no new pressure upon them, much like Hitler faced no consequences from the appeasement of Neville Chamberlain and his seizure of the Sudetenland. As some very smart historians and very experienced diplomats have pointed out, Putin has one aim and one aim only: to take all of Ukraine, not to just get a piece of it, just as Hitler wanted all of Czechoslovakia and all of Europe, and maybe even beyond, because he wants to recreate the Soviet Empire, just as Hitler wanted to build his universal Third Reich. Very, very parallel. These experts have said the only way you're going to stop Putin is by defeat, or at least horrible stalemate for him on the battlefield. He is not going to concede to the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. Period. He's just going to continue to play Trump, prolong any negotiations, assuming they even take place, and continue to pummel Ukraine in the hope that he can get so much of Ukraine territory that Trump will cave in. And like the takeover of the Sudetenland, this will be the opening for him to take all of Ukraine and then perhaps move on to other parts of Europe. Now, you were mentioning the follow-up.
Well, I want to go back. You said that it was 5-0 Putin. So can you go through all those 5 points that you think Putin scored?
Yeah, there were 3 he scored here, and a couple more he scored at the follow-up. So it's 5-0. The big thing he scored at the follow-up was no American troops to guarantee the security of Ukraine. He said maybe we'll participate in some other ways. Meaningless. Committed to nothing. Another huge concession to Putin. Because the only thing that's really going to deter Putin is either, massive improvement in Ukraine's position or American or NATO troops. And the 5th concession is Putin, and Trump didn't dispute this. Not only did Trump renege on American troops, but Putin has said no NATO troops in Europe, in Ukraine. And the next big concession, the 5th one, was Trump said no NATO for Ukraine. Absolutely one of the main aims of Putin, because no security guarantee from Trump is worth anything. He changes his mind by the minute and usually is taco, usually chickens out. The only thing that in the long run could secure Ukraine would be membership in NATO because of Article 5, which commits all of NATO to respond to an attack on any given NATO member. That was the pivotal treaty in the late 40s that really established this collective security system that has kept the West safe and kept democracy alive in all of these many decades. And Ukraine desperately and very much needs to be part of NATO. Now, supposedly the big positive that came out of the follow-up was Trump claims he's arranging what, Sam?
A meeting between Putin and Zelensky.
Yeah. And at this point, is that real?
Not that I've...
No. Has Russia agreed?
Not publicly, no.
Not at all. In fact, they poured cold water on it. They've said, well, we need a lot of preparation. Maybe it's got to be lower level officials meeting, which of course has happened over the years. It's clear how they're playing Trump like a fiddle. No ceasefire, no sanctions, no immediate meeting of the principals. Let's just prolong this war as long as we can. And they believe the longer the war goes on, the more advantages they have because of their basically superior military and superior manpower. That's why I say it's 5 Putin, 0 Trump.
Right, so it's no ceasefire, no sanctions, no U.S. troops, no NATO troops, no NATO entry. That's the 5
And let's make it 6. Add on the red carpet treatment that elevates Putin. So 6.
Yeah.
Nothing. Trump got nothing. 0, zip, nada out of Putin. You know, at least when the Allies gave the Kuril Islands to Russia, they at least got to the Soviets back then. They at least got something of a commitment, which they did fulfill for a while, to enter the war against Japan. It turns out because of the atomic bomb, their entry was not necessary and was harmful. But in the case of the 1938 appeasement of Hitler, what did Europe, the UK get in return? Nothing, zip, 0, except to give the dictator the green light to launch more aggression, more massacres, more war crimes, more atrocities.
It seemed like after the Europeans came out of that meeting with Trump, it seemed like security guarantees they were optimistic about security guarantees. Can the U.S. still provide certain security guarantees without sending troops on the ground, logistically or supporting?
There's no substitute for troops on the ground, let's face it. Yes, of course, they can provide air cover, perhaps, as you say, logistics, intelligence, more military aid. But who knows with Trump whether any of that's going to happen.
Right. I mean, one of the issues with Trump as a leader is, like you said, he flip-flops so often that his leadership is flimsy as a piece of paper. I mean, there's nothing that this guy provides in terms of leadership that gives you any sort of real confidence. Yeah,
again, looking at the big historical picture, the critical things in negotiations is credibility. You have to have people believe in your word, believe you're not going to turn around 180 degrees tomorrow, but you have credibility, you stand by what you say and what you believe. Theodore Roosevelt had that credibility. Jimmy Carter had that kind of credibility in 1978. Trump has none of it. And this notion that Trump is this great deal maker, what do you think of that? Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a load of bullshit.
Of course. Remember he pulled out of the Iran nuclear accords, what was it, about 8 years ago? And what did he promise? He's the great deal maker. He's negotiated a better treaty. After 4 years of his first term and 7 months of his second term, what has he negotiated for a better treaty?
Nothing.
Zip. Nothing.
You said this the other day. It feels like he thinks he's still on The Apprentice or something. Like he can throw stuff around and flirt with people and do this and do that, and his thumb up, his thumb down. It's like, dude, you're dealing with world conflicts here. You can't treat this like a reality TV show.
Yeah. One of the New York Times columnists, Friedman, who's been writing for decades, very experienced, he said, it's not just Trump, although it's the whole Republican Party, and it's who just, have no standing either, and it's the fact that they've decimated the foreign policy apparatus in the government. He doesn't have people advising him who know anything, who have experience.
He's got little Marco.
Yeah, he's got little Marco. He's got Putin's puppet, Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, God.
He has this Witkoff guy who's way over his head.
Yeah.
There just isn't a solid group of advisors behind him who have knowledge and experience. Again, that's critical. You don't go it alone. If you look again at all of these successful mediations, negotiations, treaties, there's a tremendous amount of work and preparation that goes into it. As you said, Trump still thinks he's on The Apprentice. He can just show up on set and, do anything he wants and, wave the magic wand and it's going to happen. You're right. That's what he really thinks. Doesn't have to do any prep, no knowledge, no thinking. And I just read an article by the producer of The Apprentice. I don't know if you saw that article. No. He said it was all a phony.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
All a phony. Trump was a horrible businessman.
Right.
He was going through all kinds of bankruptcies, and they phonied him up as this great businessman, as this, business genius. It was all phony. And the producer said he deeply regrets now having played this part in creating this phony image of Donald Trump.
If things do progress and there's actually a meeting with Putin, Zelensky, maybe even a ceasefire, are you going to go back on your worst foreign policy meeting ever?
Well, maybe there'll be better ones. I'm not sure that negates how bad this meeting was. But yes, I'm always willing to accede to the facts. And I've said many times, I would hope this war ends in a way that doesn't just let Putin gobble up Ukraine. And if they pull that off, you'll hear it for the first time on this show. I'm not afraid to admit I'm wrong. Remember, immediately after I missed the 2024 election, what did I admit? Immediately that I was wrong.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Trump's latest move, a full court press to eliminate mail-in ballots and voting machines before the 26 midterms, despite lacking constitutional authority and drawing legal fire.
Yeah. We warned about this, right, many times in the show, that he doesn't want a free and fair election in 2026. He wants to rig it as best as he can to favor the Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. And this attack on mail-in ballots is misguided in so many ways. I'll just mention a couple. Number one, he said, the United States is the only country that allows mail-in ballots. Is that true, Sam?
No.
Dozens of countries, including our closest allies, Canada, the UK, Australia, use mail-in ballots. Secondly, he said mail-in ballots are rife with fraud. Is that true, Sam?
As you said the other week, not only are the things Trump say lacking evidence, they're counter to evidence.
There have been study after study of mail-in ballots, which are used now exclusively in many states, including blood red Utah. And the fraud is inconsequential, of no significance. This proved to be a very safe and very secure way. What Trump doesn't like about it is that Democrats and independents use mail-in ballots to a greater degree than do Republicans. The third lie on which this is based is the idea that by executive order, he can just override the election rules of the states. In fact, he's even said the states are agents of the government. Is that true? Can he wave his executive wand and override the laws of the states?
I don't believe so.
No. The Constitution gives to the states the administration of elections. Congress can intervene, but only Congress. It only gives Congress the authority to modify state election laws and rules. And they've done it a number of times in every case to make voting more secure and easier, not to make it so much more difficult. The classic example, of course, is the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Help America Vote Act, the Motor Voter Act. Now, for the first time, Trump wants to make voting more difficult and really exclude lots of people who can't vote in person and have to rely on mail-in ballots. And the whole thing is based upon 3 fraudulent assumptions. Again, not just without evidence, but directly contrary to evidence. I also point out in my book, you got it here, Sam? Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism. It'll be out September 1, University of Notre Dame Press. You can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or the Press website. I point out in my book that things like states' rights, which Trump and other Republicans have claimed to uphold for so long, are discardable ideas for public consumption. And Trump certainly overwhelmingly proved that. He's perfectly willing to trash states' rights if it serves his political interests. What could be more detrimental than claiming states are just the agents of the federal government? Again, disregarding, I'm sure he's not aware of it, Article 10, Amendment 10 of the Bill of Rights, which reserves powers to the states that are not given to the federal government.
Let's move on to more Epstein news. The House Oversight Committee says it intends to release some of the documents from the Justice Department about the case involving convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The committee expects to receive the documents from the DOJ later this week. There's also a lot of talk about major redactions.
My head is spinning, Sam.
Really?
It's like in The Exorcist, remember, when her head goes around 180 degrees. Well, following this story, your head has to go around maybe 180 degrees several times. What did Attorney General Bondi first say about this so-called Epstein material?
They're right on her desk.
Right on her desk, ready to be released. Then what did she say next?
They don't exist.
And what does she say now?
Now they're going to be released.
Now they do exist. And they're going to be...
How could you trust somebody who lies that blatantly?
Of course you can't. And you know these are going to be doctored. 100%. Do you think they're going to release... They've already admitted, according to a lot of press reports, that Trump is in these files.
Right.
And we know he had a close relationship with Epstein for at least 15 years. In 2002, he talked about Epstein being a great guy, that, like me, he likes beautiful women and he likes them young. Duh. Where did he get that from if he didn't have a relationship with Epstein? So we know that's true. And what are the chances that this administration is going to release anything with Trump's name on it?
Zero.
But, if they find any Democrats, maybe Bill Clinton, it'll be released with in huge bold letters with neon lights on top of it.
Yeah. Probably.
So don't trust anything.
Now, when you say doctored, do you really think... Do you mean just redacted?
I mean redacted.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I might have used... I'm glad you caught me up on that. Yes, redacted. But, maybe doctored. Who knows? But no, I'm not standing by that. But certainly redacted for political purposes.
Yeah, it's going to be hard at this point to trust anything that comes out of the Trump administration about Epstein.
This is the same Attorney General claims that Barack Obama was a traitor.
Whatever, yeah.
Whatever you may think of Obama, he ran probably the cleanest 8 years we've ever seen in American history. He may have other failings, but he wasn't corrupt, and he was about as far from a traitor as one could get. And at the same time, they're calling Obama a traitor. They're celebrating real traitors, right? The Confederates who shed blood against their own country just to defend and uphold the horrific system of slavery, resurrecting monuments, changing base names back to Confederate names. So no, you should not trust anything that comes out of this administration.
I don't know if they could have handled it worse in terms of lying about the files, running to Maxwell and we still might get something from her. We don't exactly know, but
it's
running
really
to Maxwell
suspicious.
and doing whatever they did with her, it's all really weird.
She just got transferred to this minimal or low security prison where, she has all kinds of privileges, way better than the prison she was in. What was that all about? She is a horrific predator. She trafficked underage girls to Jeffrey Epstein. She participated in the molesting and the assault on these young girls. And she deserves to go to a much lower security prison.
And I believe Kash Patel was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And he, I mean, again, what's real here? But on the Joe Rogan podcast, he said that the Epstein files don't exist. And now suddenly they exist again.
Yes, I know.
So he was either blatantly lying or had no clue what he's talking about. Either way, that's a pretty bad look.
And this guy is supposed to be the head of the FBI. Well, we've talked a lot about him and, why he is one of the worst possible appointees to head the FBI. Not only not having the credentials, but being nothing more than a total Trump loyalist. All right, let's move on.
That 6 Republican governors from West Virginia, South Carolina, Ohio, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana have deployed over 1,100 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., of course, at Trump's request. The move has sparked lawsuits and warnings about federal overreach and threats to civil liberties.
This is really chilling on so many levels. First of all, it's all based on a lie. Trump claims, rising, rampaging crime in Washington, D.C. Is that true?
Well, he's only allowed to do this under an emergency situation, so he has to
say
lie
that.
about
That's the lie.
A fake emergency.
We
right?
showed the graph on another show, right?
Right.
Sharply declining rates of crime. It doesn't mean that D.C. doesn't have a crime issue, but it means Trump lied about it. And if you want to deal with D.C. crime, as we've talked about before, there are ways of doing that are the right way of doing that. You meet with local officials. You meet with the police forces in D.C. You figure out where the hot spots of crime are, what you can do about it. You look at some of the root causes of crime. But to be sending National Guard troops and mobilizing them from politically compatible states is truly chilling. It shows the real motive. This is not going to in the long term solve any crime, but it does show that Trump is willing to use the military to rely on states that support him to clamp down on whoever he chooses to clamp down on, no matter how bogus and how fabricated the justification. Previous presidents have not used the military in this way. They've only used it in true emergencies like the 1992 Los Angeles riots, and then in coordination and cooperation with the local officials.
Now, did you hear this? That I'm looking at the Washington Post right now. On the front page are 2 D.C. stories. One is that Trump is touting progress of the operation, but there's no publicly available data. So without publicly available data, it's difficult to measure the progress.
Trump never loses, remember?
Right.
Everything he does is the greatest ever. He's still claiming he really won the 2020 election, that he lost by 7 million popular votes or so and 100 or so electoral college votes, and every single study has said it was one of the most secure and fair elections in history. He probably still thinks Barack Obama was born in Africa, not in the U.S., that everybody wanted Roe versus Wade to be overturned, that prices are drastically falling, whatever. The thing is, he just makes things up, whatever serves his interest. And, I think he claimed we've already given $350 billion worth of aid to Ukraine when it's less than half of that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he says. Now,
about that lying, it seems there's another article second in place on the front page of the Washington Post digital app that says the Justice Department is now investigating the D.C. police over alleged fake crime data. So the Justice Department is trying to make Trump's lies true now, it seems.
That's what they're doing with the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Well, it seems like, this is...
Same thing.
This is, yeah. The Justice Department is investigating whether Washington, D.C. police manipulated data to make crime rates appear lower.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It's just what they're doing with economic statistics. And by the way, we also have FBI statistics. It's not just the local police that traces crime rates, by the way. So Trump politicizes everything. Now he's politicizing even the statistical information that we get from government, which has been the gold standard, throughout most of our history. Now it's going to be the lead standard. The alchemists wanted to transform lead into gold. Well, Trump is transforming gold into lead.
On Monday night, Trump tweeted this. D.C. gave fake crime numbers in order to create a false illusion of safety. This is a very bad and dangerous thing to do, and they are under serious investigation for doing so. Until 4 days ago, Washington, D.C. was the most unsafe city in the United States and perhaps the world. Now, in just a short period of time, it's perhaps the safest and getting better every single hour. That's from Trump on Monday.
All of that is lies. It was never the worst. It's not the safest. It is getting better.
No, D.C., he says it was the most unsafe city in the world.
Yeah, this is all...
Come on.
Yeah, all piles of nonsense.
But you think people actually believe that D.C. is the most unsafe city in the world?
Who knows?
That's crazy. Okay. Our final topic before we move on to questions. According to a new survey from the Pew Research Center, Trump's approval rating is tumbling, raising questions about his political clout heading into the 26 midterms.
Yeah, the latest poll from a major polling outfit had him at 38%, a low point, lower than his even 41% average during his first term. 60% disapproval. We can do the math, right? 60 minus 38 is 22. 22 points under water. That's just incredible, particularly for a president in, less than a year. Usually you get about a year of a honeymoon with much higher approval ratings. It's stunningly bad. And he's underwater on every single issue, including his signature issue of immigration, and deeply underwater on his handling of foreign affairs and the Ukraine war. The tragedy is it's all too late. Why couldn't the American people see this before they gave him a second term? It was all out there.
That either. That's something that I still haven't been able to wrap my mind around. Is like, we've said this 1,000 times.
Yes.
Trump is not subtle.
Nope.
He told us exactly what he was going to do. How did people not see this coming?
Beats me. It may take years, if ever, to figure this out.
So I'm looking at, this is an article from Statistica ranking the most dangerous cities in the world in 2025 by crime rate per 100,000 inhabitants. Now, there is one U.S. city on the list, actually.
East St. Louis or New Orleans?
Close. Memphis, Tennessee. Which is what? A red state.
Red state, a huge red state.
Right, but yeah, no blue cities on this list.
None.
A lot of South African cities.
Not surprised.
Caracas.
Mogadishu maybe too. Yeah, I don't know.
A city in Honduras, Brazil.
Yeah, but not Washington, D.C.
Not Washington, D.C. Not even in the top 10.
Not close.
And like we said, in fact, there's a red state city. I'm sure there's a blue mayor in Memphis, but still.
Probably, but still, the state has a lot to do with law enforcement, much more so than the federal government, by the way.
And I bet if you look at that state legislature, too, it's in Tennessee, it's almost all red.
Oh, yeah, it's overwhelmingly red. Yeah. It's a trifecta.
But in Trump world, crime only exists in blue states and blue cities. So
that's correct.
All right, you ready to get to some questions?
Yep, I know you got some housekeeping first.
Before we get to that, we've got over 1,000 people watching, but only 300 likes. Like the stream, it helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. Although we're live every Thursday and Tuesday at 9 p.m. Donations and memberships get priority in questions.
And are much appreciated. We really need them.
I also noticed that, who was it? John Rogers, gifted 5 memberships. So thank you for that.
Thank you,
Rogers.
That really helps.
Let's get to it. If Donald Trump managed to get a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine that involves Ukraine giving up territory, I feel this would not give Trump key 11.
That's the foreign policy success.
Yeah. What if this all comes to be and there is peace, but Ukraine gives up territory? You're saying that's still a big fit, like not.
That's still. I don't think that's going to last. I think if Ukraine gives up the kind of territory that Putin wants, it's going to be the end of Ukraine.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but that's certainly history suggests, given the parallel with Czechoslovakia, that's a real strong possibility.
Here's an interesting follow-up. Given the state of the Russian military and their poor training, reliance on Soviet-era vehicles and equipment, and high casualty rate, do you believe that Putin's future plan of European domination is at all feasible? I know they've been ratcheting up production of new military tech, but I don't know if this will make any sort of difference. That's a good point. Can they even, certainly take over Europe seems like a pie in the sky idea, but do you think they can actually take over all of Ukraine?
No. Well, yes, I think they could conceivably take over all of Ukraine, particularly now that they seem to be having, this very close alliance with North Korea, which is supplying them with various kinds of munitions. And I don't know if they get anything from China or not, but that's certainly a possibility down the road. I don't see them conquering, Germany or France, but they certainly, like they're doing with Ukraine, going after some of the smaller European nations that are less able to defend themselves. But of course, most of those are in NATO, and that could risk a European-wide war and maybe even risk nuclear war. It's so dangerous what Putin is doing and why he needs to be strongly opposed and not appeased like other dictators.
I agree. Yesterday, Zelensky told Trump that Ukraine does not hold elections during wars. Trump laughed and he said he liked that. Do you think Trump will try to provoke something to help him stay in power, or is Trump just joking?
Every time there's some kind of backlash, Trump's lackeys say, oh, he was just joking. Trump has no sense of humor. Let me tell you that. He doesn't joke. What he says, you've got to take seriously. I don't know if he'll be physically able to serve again at the age of, 81 or 82, but I'm certain he will do everything he can to make sure we don't have a free and fair election in either 2026 or 2028. We're already seeing that by these executive orders that he's issuing and his claim that he can override anything in the states.
I'm trying to find my cursor. There it is. This is from James LaGruta. They said, Professor, I decided to put down Paul Revere's Ride in favor of White Protestant Nation, your book. Then I plan to read Conservative at the Core. What are your thoughts, recommendations?
I think those are absolutely perfect books to read in tandem. A lot of the ideas of Conservative at the Core were first raised, although not in quite as sharp a way, in White Protestant Nation. So Conservative at the Core, published 17 years later, and, with much more recent data, is the perfect follow-up to first reading White Protestant Nation, which I think was the major breakthrough in the history of American conservatism, which had largely been ignored prior to that time. I brought into play for historians lots of figures that were either unknown entirely or neglected, and the same thing with lots of organizations. I basically introduced a whole new cast of important characters to the historical record. It's 600 pages, so it's hell of a read. It's much easier Conservative at the Core, but I think the read of White Protestant Nation will be worth it.
Professor, this morning President Trump called Fox and Friends. In the call, he spoke of, quote, his low score points towards going to heaven. Is that not his senior mind recognizing his sinful past. What do you think, sir?
I would hope so, but it sounds more like Trump going off the rails as he has so many times in, things that he said which just make no sense and have no context.
This next one is about the 6 Republican
Right,
states
we just talked about
troops. They say, I might not be from D.C., but this move should make anyone feel pretty uncomfortable. What are your thoughts? We talked about that.
Yeah, not just people uncomfortable in D.C., but people uncomfortable in any state or city. And it's only blue ones, of course, that is a potential target of Donald Trump. And again, it has nothing to do with the objective situation, because Trump will just make up a justification.
Do you have any thoughts on Texas Democrats returning to the state now that they've announced they'll do so?
I'm very sad about that, because I think it means that you're going to get the gerrymander on top of the gerrymander. It's not as if the Texas congressional districts weren't already gerrymandered, going back really to and it wouldn't be the first time that they did mid-census gerrymandering just for political ends. They did it in between the censuses of 2000 and 2010, and now they're doing it again, even though they'd already gerrymandered the districts during the regular redistricting cycle, and that is now under litigation. We had the hearing. I testified on part of that case, and I testified on the earlier case that went to the Supreme Court in 2006.
Professor, do you think the other, blue states will punch back at the Texas gerrymandering like California is?
Well, I'm glad to see, Sam and I have had a bit of a dispute about this, but I don't think the Democrats can just lay down here. I think, they've got to grow a spine and they've got to fight back. New York would be another state that maybe could do something. I'm not sure how much maneuvering room there are in other blue states. But let's not forget, too, there are a lot of red states where gerrymandering midterm could take place. And I'm not sure Democrats, when the smoke clears, have the advantage. But they can't just, once again, do nothing in the face of Republican attacks.
Philip H. says, I'm disappointed in the Texas Democrats coming back. They claim it's a democracy-ending issue. And then they say they can't stay until November. Why not? Pritzker is a billionaire, and crowdfunding could keep them there indefinitely. I mean, they have families, too. Don't forget.
Yeah, they have families. They have finances. But I wish they could. I'm at least emotionally on board with Philip H. But it's very hard to stay out for many, many months. Particularly, you got the FBI after you. You have lawsuits. As you say, they have families. They have obligations. And as I pointed out many times, Abbott could call as many special sessions as he wants.
This is from Daniel Greaves. They say, if Florida and Indiana corruptly redistrict similarly to Texas, will that doom Democrats' hopes of winning the House in 2026?
It certainly would if the Democrats don't retaliate, for example, in California and New York. So really, control of government, which is critically important, is at stake here. And remember, while I'm saying Democrats can't just accede to what the Republicans are doing, I still strongly support in the long run the goal of federal legislation to outlaw political gerrymandering, now that the conservative Supreme Court has said federal courts can't touch it. States can do whatever they want on political gerrymandering.
Do you support uncapping the House with the Wyoming rule, cube root rule, or something else?
I don't.
What is that? I don't know what any of that is.
Yeah, I'm not. I think it's to change the apportionment of the House, and I don't want to mess with that.
Gotcha. To what extent did Operation Paperclip's recruitment of former Nazi scientists shape U.S. scientific and military advancements during the Cold War, and how should we evaluate the ethical trade-offs involved in the program?
This is an issue that has plagued humanity forever, and I don't mean the particular issue here, but rather, do you do what is practical? and what's to your advantage, or do you do what is right? And that's, a very difficult ethical dilemma that even, very renowned leaders have come down on different sides of, just as FDR and Truman came down on the side of recruiting the former Nazis. Really mostly, of course, Truman, since FDR died before the end of the war. But the operation, at least planning for it, had already been in place. They called it Operation Paperclip because they doctored the dossiers of these prominent scientists and technicians to launder their Nazi affiliations, and they, put paper clips on it, supposedly. It was important, indeed, for U.S. scientific and military advancements, particularly when it came to the space race and ballistic missiles, kind of the... Do you know who the supposed father of the American space program was, Sam?
No.
Wernher von Braun. And guess what? He was one of the scientists that was recruited into the U.S. through Operation Paperclip. Very, very difficult and fraught ethical dilemma.
What are your thoughts on Trump saying that the Russia-Ukraine war is, quote, Biden's war?
Typical Trump. Remember what he said? Anything good is me. Anything bad is Biden. In fact, the opposite is true. It was Biden and Biden alone that put together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from quickly conquering Ukraine and then, I believe, going on to try to achieve his broader ambitions. It wasn't the leaders of Germany or Canada or France. It was Biden. And the only reason Ukraine has survived is because of Biden. So in a sense, yes, it is Biden's war in the sense that Biden was the pivotal figure in stopping Ukraine from falling under Russian domination. But of course, and, Trump has totally fudged this. Who started the war and who was responsible for the war, Sam?
Putin.
Putin and no one else. Not Biden, not Zelensky, not any other world leader.
Yeah, it's again, it's hard to follow the MAGA logic. It's like, hey, we don't want to be involved in foreign affairs, but also Biden should have stopped Putin from invading. And, the whole Obama 2014 Crimea thing. Is there anything on Obama? Because that's something I don't really lean towards it's Biden's fault. But and the entire European Union, seemed like maybe they should have had a little bit of a stronger stance when Putin...
I think so. I mean,
Crimea.
They did impose some significant sanctions. And the issue was, there are no troops other than Russian troops there. Very, very difficult to get Crimea back from Russia. But I agree, perhaps stronger medicine might have been called for. But, we're looking in hindsight here.
Justice Gemini says, what steps should Dems be taking immediately to give themselves a real chance at winning in 26?
Well, we talked about countering red state gerrymandering. That's critical. Recruiting really good candidates to run for House, Senate, gubernatorial elections, and they do seem to be doing that. Raise significant amounts of money, because money is very important in these local and statewide races. And most importantly, what have Democrats fallen down on, and what do they need to develop, Sam? Message that resonates with Jane and John Doe America. Get a compelling, simple message. As the great lawyer hero for the Justice Department, the late, great Jerry Hebert once said, get it down to where the goats can get it.
This is from Fried. You all right?
I'm good.
All right, we're almost done. Did you see this? I saw a video of this of a Russian tank with a U.S. flag on it. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I did hear about that. It was a captured tank, and they put U.S. flags on it. I guess, in Putin's twisted mind, the idea was to try to show that America was supporting Putin's war effort in Ukraine.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know what else they could have had in mind for that.
All right. Were current political figures miserable during the Obama years or happy? Did they become disgruntled more during the Biden years?
Well, you'd have to look at individual figures, and we're not going to do that, but let me just give you a general answer. It was very mixed during the Obama years for two reasons. One, Obama was very successful as a policy-making president. He probably kept America from falling into another depression with his bailout bills, the stimulus bill. The Affordable Care Act is the most important piece of social legislation, at least since the Americans with Disabilities Act in the early 90s, but more likely since Medicare and Medicaid in the 1960s. Where Democrats were very disgruntled with Obama was that he was a horrible party builder, that while he was personally successful, the Democrats suffered enormous electoral disasters, losing control of the House and the Senate in the midterms of 2010 and 2014, losing control of numerous swing state governments like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, and Michigan in the 2010 midterms, which enabled the Republicans to gerrymander the state legislatures and congressional delegations of those states. So it was very mixed. And I think the disillusionment with Biden came late, until the terrible debate and the attacks, unconscionable public attacks on him by Democrats. He was doing well, maybe not spectacularly, but doing well among Democrats. No one challenged him. Unpopular presidents like Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford have been challenged seriously within their own party. Joe Biden wasn't. There wasn't even a protest vote in the primary. So I think our view of Biden is being tilted by, the last part of his administration. And let's not forget, Biden achieved more domestic policy accomplishments overall, even more than Obama, more than any president since the 1960s.
Obama. All right, we'll wrap up with a statement, a $15 donation, though, from Krasimir Boyanov. They say, Professor, I just want to thank you for the relentless work you and Sam are doing to disseminate the truth. Good job, Dad.
Thank you. We try.
We try. Also, shout out to Formetta What for your donation. I think that's all the donations for tonight. All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. Don't forget to like the stream. The good news is Lichtman Live post show comes up right after this.
Wow, that's really good news.
Dad, what are your final words to the people?
Learn from history. You do not succeed by appeasing dictators. You only succeed by resolutely opposing them and making them pay the price for their aggressions.
I agree with you. Say good night.
Good night.